Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Acting Prime Minister with me, Paul Brand. And this podcast suddenly got very real. The race has now begun. There's no shortage of candidates to replace Theresa May, but this week we hear from one of the frontrunners. Dominic Raab resigned as Brexit Secretary over the Prime Minister's Brexit deal. Now he reckons he can negotiate a better one. A black belt in karate, a champion boxer. He's known for his hard image, but perhaps looking to soften it, he invited me into his home to talk not just about his future, but his past. Sitting around his table, looking at family photos, he explained how his father fled to Britain in the 1930s, but having escaped the Nazis, he also faced a battle with cancer, dying when Dominic Raab was just 12. This is a fairly personal interview with a man who struggles to show emotion, someone of great control who thinks he could be a great Prime Minister. But does he have the heart as well as the brain? Have a listen and see what you make of him. So, who's in the state of Ireland?
So you got my family in the pre-war era, really. So in the late 30s in Czechoslovakia, that's my dad with his mum, and they grew up and had their family in Carlsbad, lovely middle-class part of Czechoslovakia, and then of course came over, fled when the Nazis came in 1938. I think for me, my dad, when he came over here, two big things that he just loved about Britain were its tolerance and the opportunities it gave him. I think I've got Union Jack there embroidered into my trousers and the traditional 70s bowl cut.
And how old were you when your dad passed away?
So Dad died when I was 12.
So that must have been pretty tough.
It's pretty tough, of course it was, and I think the thing with any loss in life is it teaches you about preciousness. So I spend a lot of time with my boys and want to be a very hands-on dad.
Dominic Raab, why do you want to be Prime Minister?
Look, we're in a terrible rut at the moment, and I want us to have the optimism and the drive to move forward, and part of that is about getting Brexit resolved, but it's also about presenting a fairer vision for the country, for the economy, for workers and consumers, for the young people, a fairer vision of our society, and I believe I'm the candidate with the vision but also the experience to take Britain forward.
You talk a lot about fairness, and you lost your dad when you were 12. He himself fled Nazis in the 1930s. I wonder whether unfairness in life is something you're acutely aware of.
The flip side of the two sides of the same coin. When my dad came here in 1938, what made him a proud Brit was the tolerance that this country offered, which is why the Equality and Human Rights Commission investigation into the Labour Party is so heartbreaking. I would fight for tolerance, and I think all the mainstream political parties in this country should be defending that to the hilt. But there was also the opportunity that this country gave a young lad with no English, who went to a grammar school, got a good job, didn't go to university, and that opportunity society, that vision of fairness, I think is something that we need to revive and revitalise for young people today.
And although you lost your dad when you were 12, you did have some good fortune in a way that he was able to put you on a good path in life just before you passed.
Well, look, I was lucky. I had 12 years of a very loving family, we pretty middle class background, but with that history that haunted his side of the family. I was lucky enough to go to a grammar school. It was nip and tuck because I did well in the first two papers. There were 3 in those days, but on the third one, my sister was in a very bad car crash, and we were all fixated on that. I went to school anyway, sat the test, but flunked it. My mind was obviously thinking about my sister, but just before he died, my dad appealed and they agreed to judge my scores on the first 2. So that taught me something about taking your chances, but also taught me about those that just have a bad day, and making sure that there are chances throughout life for those youngsters who maybe don't have the tenacious parents that I did.
Do you think there's something about luck in life then that maybe we need to eliminate the luck of the draw and give everyone a bit of a chance?
I think we should be relentless and absolutely committed to making sure there are as many ladders of opportunity if you don't take your first shot in life. And I believe in a second chance society, so if you make a mistake, dust yourself off and have another go at it. And I think the job of leadership and government is to make sure those opportunities are there right the way throughout a young person's life.
You come across as a very controlled politician. Some people have said that maybe you're a little bit cold. Do you think your childhood hardened you in some way?
No, I just had huge amounts of love from my folks, both dad and mum, and 12 years of a very loving sort of typical nuclear family. And even when dad died, there was a lot of family that put their arms around us. My mum was heroic. I mean, Bringing 2 kids up as a single mum in their teenage years is not easy. And I'm very close to all the friends that I had at that point when I was 12 years old. They're some of my closest friends today.
You are the man, though, that the party would often put up to be the rebuttal guy. You were the tough negotiator in Brussels. Is that the kind of Prime Minister you're going to be, the tough man?
Well, look, I enjoy a good, robust debate, and I think people know that I'm resolute on Brexit and all of those other things, and we do need a bit of that to take this country, get it out of its rut and get ourselves moving forward. But I think above all, that what got us into this mess is not going to get us out of it, and I think we need more vision. I think we need change. I think we need change of direction, vision and values, and I want to put fairness at the heart of that. And I also think in leadership terms we need a generational change, and I believe I'm the candidate that can deliver that with the vision to take Britain forward.
We've just had one Prime Minister who struggles to show emotion. Do you think you're more human than Johnson?
I think it's invidious to put yourself up against any individual, whether it's Theresa or any of the previous candidates. All I'm going to do is make my case and let people judge for themselves.
But do you wear your heart on your sleeve?
I wouldn't say that was my USP, wearing my heart on my sleeve. But look, I've got a young family. I go through all the stresses and strains of life that everyone else does. And to be honest with you, when I walk through that front door here, and I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and a cracking wife who's really supportive of me and likewise me of her, it's not obsessed with politics. We talk about all the things that every young family does.
I just wonder how emotional you are as a person. When was the last time you cried?
Oh God, I don't know really. I'm not someone that bursts into tears, but I can tell you, we wept when my father died. We've had, my mum's been through cancer twice. I think those were moments where, of course, I was very choked up. But we've also got the stubborn optimism to pull through.
So maybe not somebody who bursts into tears. What was the craziest thing that you think you've ever done? Are you reckless? Are you spontaneous?
In terms of the most reckless, I'm not sure that's something I'm going to confess, even to ITV viewers.
What's the most spontaneous thing you think you've ever done?
It's a good question. I'm not really sure. I'd have to give it some thought. I mean, when I've been with my wife and we've been travelling, we've always kind of looked at. We did a road trip around California, Life Before Kids, and I think that was something where you just got this great opportunity to go and, whether it's in the forests of Northern California or going onto the beach, enjoy life and just take day by day. So I love a bit of that, but the reality is that politics and the challenges that we face now do also need someone who's got the negotiation experience at the Foreign Office as Brexit Secretary, got the vision, and that's a heart and soul thing, not just a mental thing, a sense of magnetically where this country wants to be led towards, but also got the plan and the personal attributes and character to take us towards that.
We will get onto some of the substantive stuff, I promise you. I'm just enjoying kind of understanding you a bit better. I mean, would you describe yourself as vain? Do you care about your appearance?
I think all politicians have a little bit of vanity about them, if we're really honest, but I wouldn't say I was particularly vain.
How often do you work out?
I love my sport, so I train probably 4 or 5 times a week, but that's as much about being fit and a love of sport that I nurtured from a very young age, and I'm 45, trying to stay at a certain level as long as I can.
If you were Prime Minister, you'd have to go up against the anger of Nigel Farage, the empathy, some might say, of Jeremy Corbyn. What do you think your emotional strength would be?
I think I'm a heart and soul politician. I think people know that I've got a lot of conviction about me. I resigned on principle, but also got the vision, the aspiration, the vision, the optimism, the stubborn optimism that we talked about that my parents imbued with me. But fundamentally, vision alone is not going to get us out of this rut and get Britain moving forward. So I've also got the experience from business, from diplomacy, ministerial experience to get us moving forward and to unite a team behind an aspirational vision for the future.
You talk about fairness, but you, in the past, have called feminists obnoxious bigots. You said people who use food banks simply have a cash flow problem. You want to abolish the Equalities office. Is your version of fairness everyone else's version of fairness?
Well, look, everyone has a different view about how we make this country fairer. We've taken a few selective snippets. The reality is on something like the comments that I made, not about feminism, but about those people who talk a good game on equality, but then go and say sexist thing about men. I think that's just double standards. Bear in mind that I've got a track record in my working career standing up for women's rights. As a trainee lawyer, I took a case to European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, defending women's rights, and as a war crimes international lawyer, trying to bring people to justice for the very worst crimes against women on the battlefield.
Do you stand by that comment, though, that some feminists are obnoxious bigots?
Well, the point I was making is that I think sexism is wrong, and it's wrong whether it's said about a woman or about a man, and I think equality is too precious a value for us to put up with double standards. So I do think we should call hypocrisy out in political debate and political life.
Would you describe yourself as a feminist?
No, probably not. But I would describe myself as someone who's a champion of equality and meritocracy. And, you know, my wife and I are a two-salary couple. I support her as much as she supports me. And I'm all for working women, making the very best of their potential. And that's something that's really important to me.
You say that you stand up for equality. So why do you think the Equalities Office is pointless, as you call it?
Well, I'm not arguing. You know, you're taking some selective snippets that were said a long time ago. I think the role of the equalities legislation is very important. For me, we want to be building up ladders of opportunity, and I take a more meritocratic view of fairness and equality of opportunity rather than positive discrimination or gender quotas. And I think from a meritocratic point of view, and as a champion of equality of opportunity, those are things that I don't support.
Would you maintain the Equalities Office as Prime Minister?
I think I'd want to look very carefully across Whitehall, and I think for me there is too many Whitehall departments and too much bureaucracy across the board. And I think that doesn't mean there isn't a crucial role for the state and for government, but I would like to see us have less of the quangos, and I'm not going to cherry pick which ones. I want to do that in a careful way, precisely so we can reinvest more money in the frontline public services like schools, hospitals, police, that people, and I think your viewers, probably want to see supported and strengthened.
But you're arguing for equality and fairness, and you can't tell me that you'd maintain the Equalities Office, the very office that promotes equality and fairness in Britain.
So I can tell you absolutely I will retain a very strong commitment at a political level and in government to promote equality. I just am not going to say the precise configuration of Whitehall, because I think that's something we need to look at in the round. There is too much bureaucracy, there's too much waste, from the quangos to public procurement, and I think if we want to invest in precious public services and find more money for that, that's something that we should look at.
Let's talk about some of the things that people feel are unfair in Britain and try and work out what your policy areas are on these things. So would you want to reduce tuition fees?
I think I'd love to see the burden of debt coming down on students, and we've got the Auger Review coming up. So one of the things that I've said is that we should look very carefully at what the House of Lords Economics Committee has said, and perhaps availing ourselves of the long-term lower level of interest that government can benefit from, which is around, if you take a 10-year gilt, it's around 1.5%. If we could get student interest payments down to that from over 6%, that would be a real boost. So that's something, when the Auger Review comes out, that we should at least take a good look at.
Next issue, would you allow veterans from the Northern Ireland Troubles to face the courts? Do you think that's wrong that veterans from Northern Ireland are being pursued in the courts?
Well, I think we need to be very careful about two things. One, protecting the Good Friday Agreement and making sure that there's accountability for any wrongs in the past. But I also think there should be some finality to that process, particularly given that that's a set of issues that dates back a long period of time. And so I want fairness both in terms of the Good Friday Agreement, but also fairness to those veterans that have been pursued, I think vexatiously in some cases. And certainly I'd want to clamp down on the sort of ambulance-chasing lawyers like Phil Shiner, who I think have given that set of litigation a very bad name.
You went to a grammar school. Would you like to see more grammar schools?
I think there's a real case for it, but the one thing I'd want to do is start in those neighbourhoods with the lowest levels of deprivation. I want to start with those schools with the highest levels of deprivation and the lowest standards of educational attainment, so that grammar schools are not just a middle class preserve, but, as was the experience of my dad, a real ladder of opportunity for those at the bottom of the social ladder.
So you wouldn't be opposed to opening more grammar schools? It's been quite a contentious issue. Theresa May wanted to open more, she couldn't quite get that plan through. As Prime Minister, would you reintroduce that idea of trying to expand grammar schools?
So in principle, I would support it if it can be done in a way which is a boost to social mobility and done in the most disadvantaged communities. I think the reality is that it's not going to be done without a further general election, because we wouldn't have the parliamentary numbers. My focus educationally will be on raising the standards in the state education system across the board. I'd bring back young apprenticeships to 14 to 16-year-olds, so those bright kids who are not necessarily bookish but are very ambitious have got a technical track which is held in high esteem, and I put rocket boosters under degree apprenticeships Because if you look at Warwick University and Jaguar Land Rover, that's a great scheme that allows young people to work as they're studying with all the opportunity of going to university, but none of that debt.
Would you reduce stamp duty to help people get on the housing ladder?
I think if you look at housing, when my folks bought their first home, the average home was double the average level of earnings. It's now 8 times. We've got to do much more to get young people onto the housing ladder. I think stamp duty is an inefficient tax the way it's currently calibrated, so I'd want to review it to see how we could make it easier for young people to get on the housing ladder, but also economically more efficient, so that you've got more transactions, so that you're still seeing the level of revenue come through. I'd want to see a boost to shared ownership. The government's made it clear we're going to bring an end to Help to Buy. I'd like to take that element of state subsidy and put it into shared ownership, because I think that's a real opportunity for young people to get on the housing ladder.
And just last quick policy question, would you make it easier for somebody to change their gender?
I certainly don't think I want to make it easier. I think you need to be very careful with young people at that age. I want everyone to feel comfortable in their own skin. But I do worry a little bit with some of this debate, whether it's in relation to vulnerable women in prisons or children in school, that we don't just take a very careful, balanced approach, because we need to be a society which is small L liberal, if you like, tolerant and open and warm to the LGBT community. But I also worry about the vulnerability of other people, whether it's women in prisons or children at a very tender age in school. So we need to get the balance right.
Moving on, your background is very different to, say, Boris Johnson or David Cameron. Do you think there is too much privilege in the Conservative Party? Do you think the party needs more people from a background like you?
I think we've seen, if you take the 2010, the 2015, the 2017 intakes, you're getting a lot more people coming through, both from different social backgrounds, but also teachers, doctors, soldiers, and I think it's that kind of broader diversity that we want to be showcasing with the modern Conservative Party. And certainly as a leader, I want to make the argument that whatever your start in life, you can be a success in this country. We're the party, we're the government that will allow you to fulfil your dreams. And I think it is important, as a matter of leadership and with the MPs coming through, that we're able to practice what we preach, if you like.
Do you think that contrasts you from some of the other leadership candidates, that you do have a slightly different background and different experience?
Look, I think there's some terrific candidates, and they should be judged on their merits. And I've got nothing bad to say about anyone. I'm adhering to Reagan's 11th commandment. But I'm going to talk about what I think is important. And I do think it's important that we can reach out to the aspirational working and middle classes and present an optimistic vision that says it doesn't matter what you start in life, you can be a success, and we're on your side.
We heard this morning that Boris Johnson is going to have to face trial because of the claim he made, the famous claim that we send £350 million a week to the EU during that referendum campaign. You made the same claim. Would you stand by him in a court of law?
Well, look, I'm not going to comment on the legal proceedings, which I'm not familiar with. It's a private prosecution. I think the one thing I would say as a matter of principle, though, is that I do worry a little bit about the timing of this as a private prosecution, and the sense that the cut and thrust of democratic debate ought to be decided by your viewers rather than in court. And I think in order to preserve free speech and democratic debate, that's something we should all look very carefully and consider.
Would you be willing to go to court over that claim? Do you still stand by that claim that we send £350 million a week to the EU?
Look, I answered all these questions at the time. I think that I made the case on the basis of the net contribution, but the gross contribution was £350 million a week, and I think this is the stuff of democratic debate. So, and of course, no one has presented me with any legal challenge in relation to what I specifically said during that referendum campaign.
Let's move on to Brexit in earnest now. You negotiated a Brexit deal, then you resigned over that Brexit deal, then you voted for that Brexit deal. What does that say about your consistency as a politician?
I think it probably says more about the selective way you've presented the question.
Are any of those things untrue?
Yeah, they are untrue. I did negotiate as part of the negotiating team, but as you know, I resigned because the Prime Minister didn't take my advice, which was to take a more resolute line over the backstop. And I voted against the withdrawal agreement consistently, with the exception of the third vote, which was not actually a meaningful vote under Section 13, but was really the choice between extending the deadline for negotiations, which I argued was the wrong thing to do. And I think if you look at my judgment that I made as Brexit Secretary, the advice I gave the Prime Minister, and the crucial need to reform the backstop arrangements, I believe my judgment's been vindicated.
Some people thought maybe you're being quite calculating, though, taking the job of Brexit Secretary, then resigning with a big furore. How long have you been thinking about being Prime Minister?
To be honest with you, it's not something that I gave a lot of thought to over many years, but I think the challenges that we're facing require a change of approach, change of vision, generational change in leadership, and I believe that I've got the experience and the vision to provide that. But I certainly didn't think about any of those things when I was Brexit Secretary, and I was just thinking about how to get the best deal for the country. And when push came to shove, I wasn't willing to walk a bad deal over the line, just as a matter of good conscience.
Do you think Theresa May could have got a better deal if she'd hung on?
There were various moments between July and October where I made it clear that we need to stick to a more robust line in the backstop, both in our dealings with the Irish government but also with Brussels. And I think if I'd have been backed up then and not undermined by others in government, we'd have had a much better chance of getting a deal over the line, acceptable to the UK and capable of passing through Parliament.
The EU said categorically yesterday that they will not renegotiate our withdrawal with a new Prime Minister. Are they lying?
Well, I think that we've had posturing from the EU all along, but in a sense, the EU will make its own choices. What I would be willing to do is go back to the EU and say, look, based on the only proposal that's passed through Parliament, the Brady Amendment and the Morecast Compromise, look, there are changes that could be made in the negotiations and to the deal that would be acceptable. But if it's the EU's choice that they're not going to give anything, they're not going to budge, they're going to remain stubborn and intransigent, then I think we must give the public and businesses the finality and the certainty of saying that we'll leave at the end of October. And as Prime Minister, that's what I would do.
Do you think it's possible for Parliament to stop Britain leaving without a deal?
I think it's highly unlikely if you've got a Prime Minister that's resolute and you've got a Cabinet that is disciplined, and I would restore collective responsibility in Cabinet.
What did you make of the Speaker saying yesterday that he will stay on? Do you think that affects your chances of getting a no-deal Brexit?
No, I don't think that will affect the chances, and I think Parliament should of course have its say right the way through this, but actually I think it's very difficult for Parliament to frustrate Brexit if the government is serious about keeping our promises to the people of this country. And those are promises that every Conservative made in every manifesto, in every constituency across the country in 2017. And I'm fundamentally someone that thinks that promises must be kept in politics.
Do you not worry that the Speaker could quite easily come up with some creative way to allow Parliament to block no deal? That seems to be what he may well do.
I think it's very difficult, if you look at the Institute for Government report, very difficult for Parliament to stop the government proceeding to no deal Brexit. But it's not what I want. I want a better deal. I'll go back with every ounce of energy that I've got to try and persuade the EU that there's a deal that can be done. But if they don't move, we must give this country a sense of direction, get out of this rut and take Britain forward, and that's what I do.
Do you think the Speaker has been strictly impartial in his interpretation of the procedures and the precedents in Parliament?
I think as a politician we should, and I say this about footballers, never complain about how much we pay or the referee, so I'm not going to cast aspersions on John Burke.
Okay, so just some very quick questions. There are many candidates in this contest. Boris Johnson, some would argue, is the clear front runner. So what differentiates you?
Oh look, I think Boris is probably the front runner and he's a prolific campaigner. So maybe I'll be the underdog, but I'll be the underdog fighting for the underdog. Whether it's the worker that hasn't had a pay rise in many years, the young kid from the rough background who just wants their shot in life, and the people of this country who feel written off over Brexit. And I believe I'm the candidate to take us forward.
If you get through to the final two, would you be willing to take part in a head-to-head debate with whoever that person may be? It might be Boris Johnson.
Oh, I'm the first candidate that called for televised debates with all the candidates because I want this to be about the vision and the future of this country, not just about personalities, as important as that is.
Okay, let's finish this interview the way we began, which is to try and learn a little bit more about you. What would you say your favourite film is, do you think?
I like Carlito's Way, that's my famous.
Okay, favourite song?
Of all time, gosh, I like the album I like is Inner Visions by Stevie Wonder.
Okay, favourite meal?
Steak.
Okay, good choice. And lastly, what do you think your biggest regret is in life?
I don't really have regrets. You know, I make mistakes like everyone else, but move forward and just try and learn from my mistakes.
Great. All right, Dominic Raab, thanks very much.